Right-Hearted with me, Stuart Wakefield, and I am delighted to have with me today an eclectic blogging witch from London, Lucya Starza. Lucya, thank you for coming on. I always, whenever I meet a writer, the first question I ask is, how did you start writing?
Well, I think I've always loved writing. I mean, even when I was a little child, I was always writing short stories, and I loved English at school. It was one of my favourite subjects. I went to university and I did comparative literary studies and drama. And after I left university, I did an evening class at the London College of Printing in journalism, while working as an editorial assistant on Girl About Town, which was one of those free magazines I used to hand out at the stations back in the 1980s. So I kind of always wanted to work in writing, and for a lot of my career, I've really worked on newspapers and magazines as a feature writer and as a sub-editor. But I've also, I wrote quite a few role-playing game scenarios that were published by Chaosium when I was younger. Then as I got older, I had to look after my mum because she was disabled. So I had to give up. I was at that time working as a production coordinator on a motor magazine. And it was a really full-on full-time job. And I had to look after my mum. So I had to give that up and look for work that I could do from home. Started doing a lot of freelance copy editing, bit of freelance writing, and I started working for a new age pagan publishing company, John Hunt Publishing, and they had just started the imprint Moon Books, and they were looking for a freelance proofreader and copy editor. So that was really up my street. I actually also started writing the blog when I was looking after my mum because it was something that I could do from home, and it was some writing I could do. I think in the early days I was hoping that I could earn a lot of money from blogging, and you can't. I earn a bit, but you can't earn a lot from blogging, but it's a little bit. And then after a while I suggested that I write a book for Moon Books because I am a Wiccan, but I'm an eclectic witch as well. I've been a witch for quite a few years. I joined a Wiccan coven when I was in my 20s. And I put forward the idea of writing a book about candle magic, and they said yes. And it sold quite well. And I've written a few others over the years. And then just recently, last year, I went back to writing a little bit for role-playing games again, because I've written a section on London for the Rivers of London role-playing game, which Chaosium is producing, based on the Ben Aranovich books. And this year, I've started writing a novel, it's the first time I've started writing, and it's the first time I've written a novel. I'm about halfway through now. So, yeah, that's my writing in a nutshell.
Okay. I'm interested because I often hear a lot of journalists end up writing novels. Is that something you've kind of observed as well? And why do you think that might happen?
I think everyone who writes has a novel in them. The reason why I put off writing a novel for so long is because I was aware there is not so much money in it. I mean, when I was at the London College of Printing, one of the things we were taught is never write anything unless you think you can earn some money out of it. And I think it's quite difficult to earn money out of a novel. I do think that's changed because I've got a lot of friends, particularly actually my Moon Books fellow authors, who, although their non-fiction books are professionally published with traditional publishing companies, they actually find that they earn more money self-publishing through something like Kindle Direct Publishing if they do a novel. And some of them actually do quite well that way. So I think things have changed, because I think at one time you spent a lot of time trying to get a traditional publisher to take on a novel. And, it can be really hard, and most people don't succeed. And even if they do, the royalties you get are quite low. Whereas if you do self-publish, there's because it's KDP, there's no really upfront costs, and so even every little bit of royalties you earn is profit. So I think, I don't know. That's what I'm told.
Yeah.
I haven't written a novel yet, but I'm testing it out. It makes me sound really mercenary, and I'm not. I write because I love writing, but I do also need to pay the bills.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I was able to publish my last novel. I think it was for 99 cents because I bought an image for the cover. Everything else I managed to do on my own. So, yeah, I mean, that kind of point of entry. And also, and I know, sort of fantasy is getting, well, I guess it's always been very big, but Game of Thrones has really helped it. And I don't know what your kind of colleagues have been publishing. I noticed John Hunt Publishing does some fiction, has some fiction imprints as well. But as you say, sometimes that point of entry and what you're saying, like, royalties of 35, 70% for a self-published author, if you kind of find your niche market and they already know you perhaps from some non-fiction stuff they're interested in, they're much more likely to buy from you. I am interested in the kind of particular books that you've written. Can we start with the one about candle magic?
Yeah, let me. There we go. And I actually take the pictures for my own covers as well, so I don't pay anyone for that. I'm quite a keen amateur photographer. So that's Candle Magic. That was my first pagan book that was published, and it's actually it recently became a bestseller. John Hunt Publishing considers anything that's sold about 5,000 copies to be a bestseller, and that has sold nearly 6,000 copies now. It does sell steadily every month, roughly between 80 and 120 copies a month. Sometimes it'll sell more. A couple of months ago, it sold about 400 copies in a month, which I think it always sells well in the winter because people like candles more in the winter.
Right. And so in terms of merchandising, I think I remember you saying when we spoke another time that they tend to put your books by the candles and people are much more likely to kind of, pick them up and be interested in them.
Yes. When physical bookshops are open, Treadwell's Bookshops has been really, really great at stocking my books. I've run candle magic classes there too. I used to run regular candle magic workshops based on the material in my books. But yes, Treadwell's has a display of coloured candles that you can buy with lists of different correspondences. So, like, perhaps you might do a pink or a green candle for love magic. People think green's a bit strange, but Venus, the goddess of love, is associated with the colour green. It's going into too much depth, but you get the idea.
Right. And then how do those sales compare to your others? Because I know one of your others is about sort of poppets and dolls. And again, I wondered if, people have that association with dolls as voodoo dolls, but obviously you have quite a particular view because the sort of etymology of the word poppet is very different.
Yeah. Yes, that's my Poppets and Magical Dolls book. Yes, poppets is really the traditional name for a doll used for magic. It dates back to about medieval times. And the word poppet and the word puppet both come from the same source, really. But back in medieval times, the word poppet was used for a child's toy as well as a doll used in magic. And so it really is the traditional English word for a magical doll. And really, the word voodoo doll, it's not really a very accurate term. Voodoo and the folk magic practice of hoodoo, they do use dolls, but they don't really call them voodoo dolls as such. And it's not a primary thing in the religion or the folk magic practice. Um, uh, they are used, they definitely are used, but it was kind of a term that was coined by American and European writers in the 20th century, writing perhaps slightly sensationalist books about folk magic practices in, Haiti or that kind of thing.
Right. And then how do you obviously, you have an interest, and you say, you joined a Wiccan coven when you were in your 20s. A couple of questions. Something I wanted to kind of clear up for me is I was watching a program yesterday that it's fiction, where a group of satanic witches face off against a group of pagan witches.
Oh,
And I've heard
yeah.
the term, obviously you've used the term today, Wiccan. I've also heard white, pagan, and hedge. Is there a particular distinction?
I think because there are so many, at one time, probably most modern pagan witches, which is kind of the broad general term for all witches that are living in contemporary times and associated as being pagan, most of them probably did follow a Wiccan style type of magic. Wicca was really a term popularised or really coined by, although he did borrow on some older sources, by Gerald Gardner back in the early to mid 20th century. He was very, very fascinated by traditional witchcraft practices and met up with a group of people in the New Forest who called themselves a coven, who
Okay.
He joined. So he did actually join a coven of witches. They probably weren't an ancient coven of witches, but he might have believed they were ancient. They probably only had probably only been around for anything from a couple of decades to perhaps a couple of generations. But I think Gerald Gardner believed that they had very ancient roots, and certainly a lot of their practices would have borrowed on traditional folk magic. Anyway, he he was really, really keen to kind of create a magical system from this. And he, first of all, wrote a novel, which was about witchcraft practices, and then wrote non-fiction books, Witchcraft Today, about modern pagan witchcraft and Wicca. And it really took off. It really caught people's imaginations. And although the press gave witches a really hard time, they really did. Some of the newspapers were just pretty horrible, publishing people's private addresses and things like that. And so they'd get hate mail and things like that. It's pretty
Really?
out of order. Oh, yeah. Yeah, pretty out of order.
Okay.
But I think it really caught the imagination of people, and it created a new religion. Although it's based on some ancient traditions, it is a new religion, and it spread particularly to America. And there weren't enough covens of the Gardnerian line for people to join. So people like Cunningham wrote. I think it was a guide for the solitary practitioner, so that people who couldn't find a coven to join could read about the what Wiccans did and practice in a similar way. But nowadays, it has really changed a lot. You get lots of different paths of witches. Now, the term white witch is a little bit old-fashioned. I think a lot of people would say, oh, there's white witches and there's black witches, and white witches only do good magic like healing, and black witches only do cursing and things. Well, I mean, realistically, I think although most modern witches believe that it's really pretty antisocial to go around cursing people. Um, it's not that you only do one or the other. I mean, you know, if someone did something really vile to you, if someone did something really vile to me, I would certainly consider cursing them.
Okay, so and then what's hedge witch?
Okay, hedge witches. That term was pretty much started by someone called Ray Beth, who wrote a book on hedge witchcraft, and it, in her way of looking at it, it was kind of a type of eclectic witchcraft, which is a lot of them were very Wiccan style back then, which is a bit Wiccan style, but not initiatory, perhaps solitary and large and quite nature based. So there'd be quite a lot of herbal magic, that kind of thing. Other people have taken the term to mean using a term which I believe comes from heathenism, the term hedge riding, which means kind of shamanic journeying. And so they consider hedge witchcraft to be a more shamanic type of traditional witchcraft. So it can mean different things. And there are loads of other different terms as well. I mean, you'll get people who call themselves kitchen witches, and they probably spend a lot of time in the kitchen baking, like creating food that's got herbs in it that would be, you know, healing or whatever, making potions, that kind of thing.
Okay, good. And I will say, I was doing a bit of research myself, and I also found in terms of poppets about sort of kitchen. I think they're called kitchen dolls, like a
Yeah,
Scandinavian thing that would be put up to sort of ward off any particularly evil doings.
yeah, they were very popular in Germany. There is an old I think it's from the 16th century, might be the 17th century, but there is somebody's in an inventory after someone died, or it might be their will, lists one witchy in the kitchen. And so kitchen witch dolls seem to have had quite a long tradition. And I think what
Right.
the idea was, and it's quite a common idea, that if you hang up something scary, it's going to scare off nasty things, it's going to scare off evil spirits, or, you know, so putting a scary witch hanging up in your window will scare off evil spirits, or, you know, it's kind of pretty much the same as kind of
Right.
gargoyles in churches might be, or
Okay.
pumpkins at Halloween.
Right. Okay. Okay. Good. I'm also really interested in. I mean, I've never written non-fiction. I mean, obviously, when I used to have a day job, you write sort of user manuals and things like that. But what kind of disciplines do you need to be able to write a non-fiction book, in your view?
Ooh, well, I think whatever you're writing, you need to be able to write in an entertaining way. And
Right.
I actually think it depends what market. If you're writing a popular non-fiction book, then being able to write in an entertaining way is perhaps more important than being factually accurate. That sounds really awful, but I think it's true. If you're writing academic
Okay.
books, then obviously
Yeah.
doing really good research is far more important. I mean, I try to keep a balance. I do have an MA. I got an MA in English literature, um, and I've also got an interest in history. I'm not a historian, but I've got an interest in history, and I do like doing research. So I do try, and also I'm trained as a journalist, so I'm trained to try and get the facts. But I suppose my journalistic training is I'm also trained to get an angle, and
Okay.
so they're all different, and so I think it
Mm.
does depend on your audience. But yeah, I mean, do try and get your facts right, because if you don't get your facts right, someone's gonna
Mm.
really rip a hole in it.
I always think one of the tricky things, particularly about writing about a religion, is that so many of them are open to interpretation. Um, do you ever find that your readership sort of come back and challenge you on some of the things that you've written?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, especially on my blog, because they can leave comments. I mean, it doesn't always happen, but oh gosh, yes, you can get some. Yeah, you. At one point, I was getting far more. kind of real trollish comments, and I was getting, it nearly made me give up, because no one was saying, I really like your blog, and people were just saying, like, I mean, I got some really vile mail when I blogged about a community garden, and I thought that blogging about a community garden was a really nice thing to do. But I got some really horrible comments
Right.
that asked me to take my post down because they didn't want a witch blogging about their community garden, because it might give the wrong impression that people thought there were witches there, and could I take the post down?
How odd. How odd. And then, I mean, the first episode of Right Hearted, we're talking about, emotional resilience and bravery. How do you kind of deal when you get confronted with that kind of stuff? So, because for me, I don't get a lot of direct contact. Obviously, I see reviews, and those really stick with me. If someone's giving you grief, particularly on your blog, and you said that you almost gave up, how do you deal with those, and what kind of kept you, like, what got you through that and kept you blogging?
Time. I think now it's because my blog is a really good platform to promote my other writing. That again sounds horribly mercenary, but it is. And
No.
I think you have to to be an author, you have to get a bit of a thick skin. But, I mean, with my Poppet book, I think Amazon reviews can be another thing, that you can get some vile trolls posting Amazon reviews. And
Yeah.
within an hour of my Poppet book being available on Amazon, somebody who couldn't possibly have read it from cover to cover posted a 1-star review saying there's more information on Wikipedia, which is really untrue. I spent weeks in weird and wonderful libraries looking through old books to research my Poppet book.
Right.
I went to the Museum of Witchcraft in Boscastle. I went to a conference on poppets. I did so much research. So it was grossly untrue.
Mm-hmm.
And it did affect my sales, because, if the only review there is something that says it's rubbish, it did affect my sales early on. Since then, I've got lots of really good reviews for it, and it now sells about as well as my Candle Magic book, month on month. I mean, it's only sold about 2,000 copies to date, but it's catching up.
Right. One of the things I noticed around, I think it was the kind of subtitle, and we spoke earlier about poppets and sort of voodoo dolls having that a particular connotation. Was interested to see that it talks about helping, healing, and harming. So from the helping and healing point of view, it kind of put a different spin on things for me. So do you find that those sort of negative connotations start to outweigh, or do you think that message is getting out there that, this isn't just about sticking pins in, a doll and wishing someone harm?
I think the message is out there more. I think there's a lot more awareness of poppets. Actually, one of the things that started it was Sabrina. They use a lot of poppets in Sabrina, the TV show.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
they do use them for curses there. But I think that increase the awareness of poppets. But yes, the thing is, what a poppet is, it's a symbolic representation of a person. It's like sympathetic magic, so that something looks like something can have an effect on something. So that if you've got a little doll, say somebody's in hospital, they're ill, and they ask you to send healing wishes to them, but you can't go and visit them, what you can do is you can make a little doll to represent them, and you can do a spell. Perhaps you could light a candle for healing. You could sprinkle herbs or put herbs inside the poppet that had a healing connotation. And you can visualize the healing going to that person through the doll. And that's quite traditional. Back in medieval times, people, if they were unwell, would sometimes make little wax effigies either of themselves or a part of the body that they'd hurt, and leave them at sacred sites, at temples or cathedrals, so that the healing energy from that place would continue to heal them while they were perhaps off working in the fields and couldn't be at the sacred site all the time.
Right. I was interested in what you said about research and, you know, having to do research that maybe other people might not have encountered. So you mentioned obviously, you're reading a lot of, really old books and going to specific museums for specific things and conferences. To what extent kind of immersing yourself in that research gives you ideas for other projects?
Yeah, yes, it does. I, it does a bit, but I can when I'm really caught up in a project. I really do enjoy being really caught up in a project, um, and so not too much. I mean, I do know some people who've got umpteen books on the go because they start one and then start another, and I'm not really like that.
Okay, right. I've got something like 8. But again, I think that might be a procrastination thing because I have an idea for something. And I'm like, oh, that's very shiny. I'll go and have a look at that for a while. And I'm starting to wonder if it's a way to avoid finishing the thing that I'm working on. Um, do you think that kind of dedication to one project at one time sort of comes out of your sort of journalistic background?
I've kind of always been a bit. Um, I think it's just me. I think I can be a bit single-minded about things, and I can get quite absorbed in a project and
Okay,
don't want to do anything else except that project.
right.
I think it's just me and the way my brain works.
I really wish I was more like you, Lucia.
I,
I'm just all over the place. It's just,
I actually need to be more um, less single-minded because I at the moment I often have two or three writing projects that I've got contracts for, like I'm supposed to be writing a tourist guide to esoteric London. Obviously, it's not the time at the moment, and the last year has not been the time to write a tourist guide to esoteric London. So that's been on the back burner. But now I'm going to have to start writing that again because the publisher is going to say, you can get out now. You can go catch a bus somewhere. You go to the
right.
British Library, do your research, get that book written. Um, uh, and also, I've just been asked to write another Moon Books titled Pagan Portal's Wheel of the Year. And obviously, I have some role playing things that I've been writing as well. So I kind of need to. The way I work on that is I will probably set aside a few hours a day for each project. So it's like, okay, in the morning I write my blog because that's my routine. In the morning I write my blog post, and then perhaps in the morning I will work on one book, and in the afternoon I'll work on another book. That's probably my way. But I think everyone gets their own way of writing. I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way. I think it's just whatever works for
Yes.
you.
Yeah. 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 And I have been contacted by a couple of writers who kind of get sort of bound up by the rules. And I really hate the rules of writing. And particularly, not so much, editors and publishers and things like that, but the people who set themselves up as like the gateway or like the experts. And I'm always very careful when I talk to writers to say, this is what works for me. And what works for me won't necessarily work for you. I do have a question though about your blog because I'm dreadful at blogging, and I you talked about getting into a routine. When you sit down to write your blog in the morning, is it kind of what comes to you, or do you have a plan for roughly what you're going to be blogging about and when?
Yeah, I do very much. I mean, I've been blogging for about 15 years now. So back in the early days, it was like, oh goodness, what am I going to write about? But yes, I mean, like when every Wednesday is my events page, so I write about pagan and witchy, weird, wonderful and witchy events. And at the moment,
Okay,
most of them are online. I mean, that's brilliant. So whereas at one time I was blogging about, because I'm in London, I was blogging about London events, so things you could physically go to in London. Nowadays, they're all over the place, and it doesn't matter where they are, and there's, apart from the time zone difference. And so every Wednesday is my events page. So I mostly compile that the day before, because it takes quite a long while to check websites, check Eventbrite, check Facebook, look at my regulars, and update that. So that's that. And I also have other things that I do quite regularly. Like I do a pagan eye post, which is like a picture, and that can be a picture someone sent in. It could be, I mean, Wicca is a nature religion. We celebrate the cycles of nature. So it could be a beautiful place out in nature that they photographed, or it could be a witchy item that they've just bought, or when you can go to pagan events, a picture from a pagan event they've been to, and things that I've seen and done.
Okay.
So there's that. I sometimes go through the news and do a listing of news items that are relevant, like if there's been a new stone circle found by archaeologists, or if
Right.
or perhaps like something about a new book that's come out, things like that. I also do blog about spells.
Right, good, because
things. It's not just events and books and stuff. Yeah, I blog about spells and rituals and festivals and thoughts about witchcraft.
Right. Something that happened yesterday, and I wanted to just kind of get your view on this. So it sounds like, it's quite, a tight community. And, we talked about your 1-star review, which might be somebody had a particular dislike for you or felt, like kind of competition with you. I was thinking about, my own blog and how I could, make it a bit more, not just about me and what I'm doing. And I was thinking about reviewing other writers' books. And then a part of me thought, that's a really bad idea. Because if I do that, I mean, I could really rub somebody up the wrong way unintentionally. Would you ever consider sort of doing something like that? Or would you tend to more mention that a book is coming out?
Okay. I have changed my what I do. On my blog, I used to regularly write book reviews. And nowadays, I occasionally do book reviews, but mostly I do book extracts. And it's largely for that reason. It's particularly awful if a friend, a fellow author, has written a book and asks you to write a review, and you think, oh my God, this is awful. And you can't say that. But if you put an extract on the blog, then readers can choose for themselves whether it's right for them or not. So yeah, it and also reading a book and then writing a review takes a long time. It is.
Yes, I agree.
Secrets of cheap blogging. Do things that don't take too much.
I think the problem I have, certainly with blogging, is I think about it as kind of throwaway work rather than work. You used a term about, don't do any writing that you're not going to get paid for. Has your opinion of your blog or your relationship with your blog changed over time? Do you now see it as a money-making, not exercise, but something that allows you to generate, extra revenue?
It does earn a bit of it. You can monetize blogs. I don't go wholeheartedly down that route.
Okay.
But yes, I do. I'm an Amazon associate, and if you you can put a link at the bottom of posts, so you get a tiny bit if someone buys a book through the link.
Yeah.
You can put Google ads on your blog, and I do. You get a tiny bit from that. It's
okay.
I suppose £20-30 a month.
Okay. Yeah, that's better than nothing. That's definitely something I should. I think sometimes my royalties will only be that because I'm also terrible at marketing. But okay, so how did your novel come about? Because you've you've very much been in the non-fiction world. What was like the point where you thought, okay, I'm ready to start a piece of fiction?
Lockdown.
Right. Okay.
Basically, January. Oh gosh, we've got another long lockdown. What am I going to do? Okay, well, I decided I was going to do a. I decided two things. I'm going to do a online course with Coursera. I've done some online courses with Coursera before,
Okay.
and they're free courses run by universities, and they're pretty good. Um, and I thought, okay, I'll do that,
Mhm.
and I'm going to write another book. Start writing another book. And I went and looked at Coursera, and there's a course, write a novel in 26 weeks. I thought, oh, well, okay, signing up for that. Yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Right. Okay. And is it kind of connected to what you're already writing about, or is it completely divorced?
Yeah, it's very much connected. I thought, I'm writing a chapter a week. I have to write about what I know. And so it's kind of a
Okay.
modern day Gothic story about a group of young people living in a seaside town. Um, I lived in Whitstable and then Herne Bay when I was a student, and just afterwards, because I was at University of Kent at
Okay.
Canterbury for my degree. And so it's knowledge of that. Anyway, they something I didn't do. They find the remains of an ancient burial on some cliffs, and
Okay.
decide not to tell the police or the authorities. And then some horrific things start to happen. I kind of think of it as being a cross between Shallow Grave and A Warning to the Curious.
Okay. Okay, good. I'm gonna have to wait for this one. So I mentioned earlier, John Hunt Publishing, have some different imprints. Do you think you would pursue a traditional publishing route, or do you think you will self-publish?
I'll self-publish. John Hunt Publishing
Okay.
doesn't really like publishing fiction. And generally
Okay.
speaking, if you want to publish fiction through them, you have to pay something towards the production costs. Um,
Okay.
and it's because they don't really earn much money on fiction. It's not really their
Okay.
forte. Um, and they run
Mhm.
everything on quite a tight budget. But they're upfront. They they're not.
Yes.
They tell you what the situation is, which is why
Right.
um, quite a lot of authors who publish non-fiction with Moon Books just choose to publish their fiction the indie route.
Right. Okay. And we also spoke about point of entry and obviously royalties and all that kind of stuff. I'm assuming that the work you do on role playing games is like a flat fee, and you don't get any royalties on those.
Yeah, absolutely. You get a flat fee. Um, yeah,
Right.
and I mean, I
Okay.
don't. Again, you can't earn very much money from role playing. From writing role playing stuff. I like doing it. Yeah, I really like
Mhm.
doing it. I like writing for Chaosium too. They've been a good company to work for, and it's when you have the when we were working on the Rivers of London role playing game, you'd have like Zoom meetings, and you're all a bunch of role players. So yes, it's a work meeting, but you're still chatting about your games and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm mastering a game for the Alien RPG, and if I'm really honest, I am winging it completely. Like I'll do a little bit of planning, but I mean the players are always going to take you off in a different direction, and I do sit there and I think, do you know what? There's probably a novel in this.
Mm, yeah. Mm.
So yeah, that's definitely something that I need to consider. So, what other projects do you have lined up? Obviously, you're very active on your blog, and you're working on your novel now. Obviously, we talked about your lockdown project ending up on hold because your guide to esoteric London. What other projects can you tell us about that you might have in the pipeline?
That's actually it. And to be honest, I'm a little bit scared about how hard I'm going to have to work over the next year with all of those things. I mean, I would love to go and do a PhD. I would really love to do a PhD, but I gave up looking because I've got so much other work.
Right. Yeah, and I'm kind of with you on that because I kind of did my MA. I mean, don't get me wrong, I learned a lot on my MA, but I kind of did it just because I wanted to say I had an MA, and I have been looking at PhDs. But for me, being a gay romance author, I just think I wouldn't even know what project to kind of put forward. And again, I sit there and I think, do I really just want a PhD so I can get away with somebody calling me doctor?
I know what you mean. I mean, it gives you a lot. It gives you that bit of respectability, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And I think if you are going to be, running workshops, obviously, you mentioned some candle magic workshops that you were doing at Treadwell's. I think that it does give you some weight, because I think if people are paying their own money, and I think I might have mentioned this in a previous podcast, but if I'm at work and I'm going on a course, I don't think twice about who my instructor is, because that's their job. Their job is to train you, whether or not they've actually done that subject. But if it's my money, I want to know that you know what you're talking about. And yeah, I do think MAs and PhDs kind of help you do that if you decide to supplement your income in different ways. How did your classes at Treadwell's come about?
Well, when my book on candle magic was published, I asked Christina about possibly having a launch event, and she said, well, we normally charge for launch events, but I'll tell you what, we'll do a deal. You run a candle magic workshop and I'll give you a free launch event, which was great.
Fantastic.
And the workshop sold out, and so I've gone back and done them since, and get paid for teaching classes, which is nice. And it's nice because you interact with people. I love working at Treadwell's. I'm really hoping that I can go back, and Treadwell's will be opening its physical doors again in a couple of months. They're still sorting things out, mostly selling online and doing online courses.
Okay.
But yeah, I really hope that there'll be workshops again there, that people can go to.
Good. So we've talked about the blog, and I'll put some links in the either description if you're watching, or the show notes if you're listening. Where else can people find you?
Well, you've got my blog, www.badwitch.co.uk. They can find my author page on John Hunt Publishing, Lucya Starza. I'm on Twitter at badwitch1234. I'm on Facebook as Lucya Starza. I'm on Instagram as Starza Lucya. That's because I set up a Lucya Starza account and then forgot the passwords. I was going to set up another one, but I don't. That was actually. Yeah, but that actually, it's not so. It's more general pictures that I post. So you'll get pictures of a cup of coffee, or a role playing game, as well as some witchy stuff.
Okay, fantastic. Do you know what? I think those really help, because I only ever used to put on Instagram I've written a book, buy my book, and I think you start to build up a bit more relationship with people when they start to see who you are behind that book cover. And obviously, you've been able to accomplish a lot of that through your blog. But yeah, I definitely think that Instagram is a good way of giving people that kind of insight into your life as well. Also, I found personally it's easier to do like a 1 minute video about something, so people start to get a feel for who you are as well. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you today, not only about writing nonfiction, but particularly around, all the witchcraft stuff. I've learned loads, and I'm definitely going to be looking into candle magic. I did actually set out 3 candles here in the background. They are lit, but it's so bright you can't really see them.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
definitely
I
going to
tend
give
to
it
like the
a look.
candles of an evening. What I normally do is because just a tiny bit of candle magic. If you buy a candle, obviously it's picked up all the energy from the people who handled that candle in the shop. So if you put your
Okay,
candles out in the windowsill under the full moon, to cleanse and charge your candles, and then when you light your candle, make a wish and visualize what it is you want to wish for. And twilight is a good time to light a candle
okay,
because it's a liminal time. So there you go.
okay. Okay, you know what? That's really useful because I was going to finish on a question. I've been thinking a lot about mental blocks and emotional resilience and bravery, for writers. And I have noticed talking to other full-time writers that lockdown has been really bad for them, and they seem to have lost a lot of their oomph. So I was going to ask you if there's any particular candle magic that those writers can do to give them a little push. It sounds like you've covered it. So it's cleanse your
Orange,
candle on
orange
moonlight.
candle. Orange candles are
An
good.
orange candle.
Orange is
Okay.
associated with the god Mercury or Hermes, who is the god of communication. So it's the color. In the Western esoteric magical tradition, orange is the color associated with Mercury or Hermes. And so I mean, it doesn't matter. You can use a white candle. White candles are fine, but if you happen to have an orange candle, it has some extra symbolism.
Okay, fantastic. Orange candle it is. Okay, thank you again, Lucya. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.